Or is the unsettling truth that some places seem to swallow people whole, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions and a chilling sense of the unknown? And Yosemite, with its breathtaking beauty and hidden dangers, has become one of those places, a stage for disappearances that defy explanation, fueling whispers of a curse that clings to the granite cliffs and ancient sequoias. Yosemite National Park, a cathedral of nature carved by glaciers and time, a place where waterfalls thunder down sheer rock faces and sunlight dapples through forests so ancient they seem to breathe with the earth itself. Millions flock here every year, seeking solace, adventure, a connection to something bigger than themselves. They come to hike the iconic trails, to stand in awe before El Capitan and Half Dome, to lose themselves in the vast wilderness. But sometimes, people lose themselves in Yosemite in a way they never intended, vanishing without a trace, leaving behind families and friends desperate for answers that may never come. We're not talking about the occasional accident, the hiker who takes a wrong turn and succumbs to the elements. We're talking about something far more perplexing, more disturbing. We're talking about disappearances that defy logic, cases where experienced outdoorsmen and women, familiar with the terrain, seemingly vanish into thin air, leaving behind no sign of struggle, no trace of their presence, as if the very mountains themselves had swallowed them whole. The statistics are unsettling. While official numbers are difficult to pin down due to the park's sheer size and the challenges of search and rescue operations, it's estimated that dozens, perhaps even hundreds, of people have gone missing in Yosemite over the past century. Some cases are eventually solved, attributed to accidents, suicides, or even foul play. But a significant number remain unsolved, cold cases that linger in the minds of investigators and haunt the families of the missing. These are the cases that fuel the whispers of a curse, the stories that are passed down through generations of park rangers and local residents, tales of a malevolent force lurking in the shadows, preying on the unwary. What makes these disappearances so baffling is the sheer lack of evidence. In many cases, the missing person was an experienced hiker, well-equipped and familiar with the trails. They had told friends or family where they were going, and their intended route was known. Yet, they simply vanished, leaving behind no footprints, no discarded gear, no sign that they had ever been there at all. Search and rescue teams, often employing helicopters, dogs, and hundreds of volunteers, scour the area for days, even weeks, but find nothing. It's as if the earth opened up and swallowed them whole, leaving no trace behind. And it's not just hikers who disappear. Sometimes it's children wandering away from their parents for just a few moments only to vanish completely. Sometimes it's experienced climbers scaling the sheer rock faces of El Capitan or Half Dome who simply disappear, leaving behind no sign of a fall, no indication of what might have happened. Theories abound, of course. Some point to the park's rugged terrain, its hidden crevasses and treacherous waterfalls as potential causes. Others suggest that wild animals such as mountain lions or bears may be responsible, although this seems unlikely in most cases given the lack of remains. And then there are the more outlandish theories, the whispers of paranormal activity, of portals to other dimensions, of ancient spirits guarding the park's sacred grounds. While these theories may seem far-fetched, They offer a certain comfort to those who are desperate for answers, a way to make sense of the inexplicable. Because when logic fails, when all rational explanations have been exhausted, what else is there to believe in but the possibility of something beyond our understanding? But beyond the theories and the speculation, there is the undeniable reality of the missing, the families who are left behind to grapple with the uncertainty and the grief. They are the ones who keep the stories alive, who refuse to let their loved ones be forgotten. They are the ones who continue to search, to hope, to pray for a miracle, even when all hope seems lost. And it is their stories, their experiences, that truly reveal the chilling reality of the curse of Yosemite, the dark side of this seemingly idyllic paradise. Because behind the breathtaking beauty, behind the towering granite cliffs and the ancient sequoias, lies a mystery that has haunted the park for generations, a mystery that may never be solved, a mystery that whispers on the wind, echoes through the canyons, and chills the very soul of those who dare to venture too deep into the heart of Yosemite's wilderness. And as we delve into these disappearances, we begin to see patterns, unsettling similarities that connect these seemingly isolated cases, suggesting that something far more sinister may be at play, something that defies explanation and challenges our understanding of the natural world, something that makes you wonder if Yosemite is truly as safe and serene as it appears, or if it holds a dark secret, a hunger for those who wander too far from the beaten path. The disappearance of Kenny Capps in 1981 is a stark reminder of this potential darkness. Kenny, an experienced hiker, vanished without a trace while on a solo backpacking trip. He knew the trails, he was prepared, and yet he was swallowed whole by the park. No body, no gear, just an empty space where a man once stood. His meticulously planned itinerary was found at his campsite, the last entry noting his intention to hike towards a specific waterfall, a location that was subsequently searched extensively. Nothing. It was as if the earth opened up and consumed him. Rangers combed the area for weeks. Helicopters scanned from above, and even tracking dogs yielded no results. The mystery surrounding Kenny Capps' fate remains unsolved to this day, a chilling testament to the park's ability to conceal its secrets. Then there's the case of Miriam Davis, a young woman who disappeared in 2005 while hiking with a group of friends. They were on a well-marked trail, a popular route near Yosemite Valley, when Miriam decided to take a shortcut, a seemingly harmless decision that would have devastating consequences. Her friends waited for her at the designated meeting point, but she never arrived. A frantic search ensued, with hundreds of volunteers and park rangers scouring the area. Days turned into weeks, and hope dwindled with each passing sunrise. A few pieces of her clothing were eventually discovered, scattered along a rarely used path. But no other sign of Miriam was ever found. What led her to stray from the main trail? Was she lured away, or did she simply lose her way and succumb to the elements? The questions remain unanswered, a haunting reminder of the fragility of life in the face of Yosemite's vast and unforgiving wilderness. And let's not forget the unsettling case of the three Boy Scouts in 1999. These young men, aged 12 to 14, were on a camping trip with their troop when they wandered off during a game of hide and seek. The other scouts searched for them, calling their names, but only silence answered their cries. The troop leaders immediately notified the park rangers, and a massive search operation was launched. After 3 days of relentless searching, the boys were found miles away from their campsite, disoriented and dehydrated, but miraculously alive. They had no memory of how they got there, claiming they had simply woken up in the middle of the forest. Yosemite, with its breathtaking beauty and hidden dangers, seems to be one of those places. But the story of the missing scouts is just one drop in an ocean of disappearances. What makes these cases so particularly unsettling is the sheer lack of evidence. No signs of struggle, no footprints, no discarded belongings, just gone. It's as if these people simply vanished into thin air, swallowed by the vast wilderness. One of the most baffling cases is that of Kenny Capps, a 28-year-old experienced hiker who disappeared in Yosemite in 2016. Kenny was an avid outdoorsman, familiar with the park's trails and well equipped for a multi-day hike. He'd even summited El Capitan a few times. He told his family he was planning a solo trek to a remote area of the park, a place he'd always wanted to explore. He was prepared, he had plenty of supplies, and he knew the risks. He checked in with his family regularly via satellite phone, sending photos and updates of his progress. But then the calls stopped. After a few days of silence, his family reported him missing. A search and rescue team was immediately dispatched. They scoured the area where Kenny was last known to be, but found absolutely nothing. No trace of his campsite, no sign of his gear, no footprints, nothing. It was as if he had simply ceased to exist. The search was eventually called off, and Kenny was presumed dead. But his family refused to give up hope. They hired private investigators and continued to search for him on their own, clinging to the possibility that he was still out there somewhere. But years have passed, and Kenny Capps remains missing, a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurk within Yosemite's seemingly idyllic landscape. What makes Kenny's case so strange is that he was an experienced hiker. He knew the park well, he was prepared for the elements, and he had a satellite phone to call for help if needed. It's hard to imagine how someone like that could simply vanish without a trace. Unless, of course, something else was at play. And Kenny isn't alone. There's the case of George Pensa, a 68-year-old man who disappeared while hiking near the Hetch Hetchy Reservoir in 2011. George was an experienced hiker, familiar with the area, and in good health. He was hiking with a group of friends, but he became separated from them when he stopped to take a photo. His friends waited for him, but he never returned. A search and rescue operation was launched, but it yielded no results. No sign of George, no trace of his belongings, nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished into thin air, leaving his friends and family to grapple with the agonizing uncertainty of his fate. And then there's the unsettling disappearance of Jeannette Navalier, a 46-year-old woman who vanished in 2005 while hiking with her husband near Illilouette Fall. They were taking a leisurely stroll along a well-maintained trail when Jeannette suddenly disappeared. Her husband turned his back for a moment, and when he looked again, she was gone. He searched frantically, calling her name, but she was nowhere to be found. He immediately reported her missing, and a massive search operation was launched. But despite their best efforts, the search teams found no trace of Jeannette, no footprints, no discarded belongings, nothing. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving her husband to grapple with the devastating reality of her disappearance. These are just a few of the many cases of people who have vanished without a trace in Yosemite National Park. And while some of these disappearances can be attributed to accidents, falls, or encounters with the wildlife, many remain unexplained, fueling speculation and adding to the park's eerie mystique. Could there be something else at play here? Something more sinister? Some people believe that Yosemite is cursed, that it's a place where the veil between worlds is thin, and that people are being pulled into another dimension. Others believe that there are secret underground tunnels or hidden military installations within the park, and that these disappearances are related to some kind of government conspiracy. And then there's the Native American legend of the Awanichi people, the original inhabitants of the Yosemite Valley. According to their folklore, Yosemite is a sacred place, guarded by powerful spirits. They believe that these spirits can be angered by disrespect or intrusion, and that they are capable of causing people to become lost or even disappear. Could these legends hold a clue to the mystery of Yosemite's missing people? Regardless of the explanation, the fact remains that people continue to vanish in Yosemite National Park, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and a chilling sense of the unknown. And as long as these disappearances continue, the curse of Yosemite will continue to haunt the park's majestic landscape, reminding us that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface. But what if the answer isn't supernatural or conspiratorial? What if the explanation is far more terrestrial, yet still incredibly strange? Some researchers have proposed a theory involving infrasound, low-frequency sound waves that are below the threshold of human hearing. These waves can be generated by natural phenomena like waterfalls, earthquakes, and even wind patterns interacting with the park's unique geological formations. The theory suggests that these infrasound waves can affect the human brain, causing disorientation, confusion, anxiety, and even hallucinations. In extreme cases, they could even lead to a temporary loss of memory or consciousness. Could it be that these infrasound waves are disorienting hikers, causing them to wander off the trail and become lost? Could they be contributing to the strange behavior and memory loss reported by some of the survivors? It's a fascinating theory and one that's been gaining traction in recent years. But it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't explain why some people disappear without a trace, leaving no footprints or belongings behind. It doesn't explain the reports of strange lights and unexplained phenomena that have been reported in the park. Perhaps the answer is a combination of factors. Perhaps it's a combination of natural hazards, human error, infrasound, and something else entirely. Something that we don't yet understand. Something that lurks in the shadows of Yosemite's majestic peaks, waiting to claim its next victim. And what about the animals? Do they sense something we don't? There have been reports from hikers who claim to have witnessed strange animal behavior in Yosemite. Animals acting erratically or fleeing from seemingly nothing. Could they be sensing the presence of something that we can't see or hear? Something that is causing them to panic? One hiker recounted a story of seeing a group of deer suddenly bolt and run into the forest, their eyes wide with fear. He said that there was no obvious reason for their behavior, no predator in sight, no loud noises. They simply ran as if they were fleeing from something unseen. Another hiker reported hearing a chorus of howls and screams in the distance, sounds that he couldn't identify as any known animal in the park. He said that the sounds were chilling and unsettling, and that they made the hair on the back of his neck stand on end. Could these animals be sensing the presence of something sinister? Something that is causing them to react in such a strange and unusual way? The truth is, we may never know the full story behind the curse of Yosemite National Park. The disappearances continue to baffle investigators, and the explanations remain elusive. But one thing is certain. Yosemite is a place of mystery and danger, a place where the veil between worlds seems thin, and where the line between reality and illusion can become blurred. And as long as people continue to vanish without a trace, the curse of Yosemite will continue to haunt the park's majestic landscape, reminding us that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface, and that some mysteries may never be solved, leaving us forever wondering what happened to those who disappeared into the heart of Yosemite, swallowed by its silent, watchful wilderness, leaving behind only whispers and the chilling echo of the unknown. What makes these cases so particularly unsettling isn't just the sheer number of them, but the strange circumstances that often surround them. It's the experienced hikers who inexplicably wander off trail, leaving behind their gear and all sense of direction. It's the families who report a loved one missing, only for search teams to find no sign of them, as if they simply vanished into thin air. It's the unsettling feeling shared by many who've spent time in the park that they're being watched. There's something unseen is lurking just beyond the edge of the trees, a silent observer of their every move. Take the case of Stacy Arras, for example. In 1981, Stacy, a 14-year-old girl, was vacationing with her family at Yosemite. One afternoon, while exploring near the Tuolumne River, she simply disappeared. Her father, who was just a few feet away taking photographs, turned around to find her gone. Despite an extensive search involving hundreds of people, dogs, and helicopters, no trace of Stacy was ever found. No footprints, no discarded belongings, nothing. It was as if she had been plucked from the earth. The only clue was a faint scent picked up by the search dogs, a scent that led them to the river's edge and then simply stopped. Then there's the story of Kenny Collins. In 2014, Kenny, an avid hiker with years of experience navigating the Yosemite wilderness, set off on a solo trek to find a lost waterfall. He was well prepared, carrying plenty of water, food, and a GPS device. He even texted his wife a photo from the trail early in the day, but he never returned. A search was launched and his car was found parked at the trailhead. Days turned into weeks and still no sign of Kenny. What made this case so baffling was Kenny's experience. He knew the park like the back of his hand, and he had all the necessary equipment to stay safe. How could someone so familiar with the terrain simply vanish? And it's not just hikers who disappear. In 1958, 3-year-old Tommy McLogan wandered away from his family's campsite in Yosemite Valley. A massive search ensued, but Tommy was never found. Some speculated that he had fallen into the Merced River and been swept away, but his body was never recovered. Others whispered about wild animals, but there was no evidence to support that theory. The case remains unsolved to this day, a haunting reminder of the park's ability to swallow even the most innocent. These are just a few examples of the many disappearances that have plagued Yosemite National Park over the years. Each case is unique, but they all share a common thread, a sense of mystery, a lack of answers, and the unsettling feeling that something more is at play than just accidents or misadventure. It's as if the park itself is a living entity, capable of absorbing people into its vastness, concealing them within its labyrinthine trails and towering granite cliffs. The stories speak of the land itself, almost as if the park has a consciousness, a will that dictates who gets to leave and who remains forever lost within its embrace. And as long as people continue to vanish without a trace, the curse of Yosemite will continue to haunt the park's majestic landscape, reminding us that even in the most beautiful places, darkness can lurk just beneath the surface, and that some mysteries may never be solved, leaving us forever wondering what happened to those who disappeared into the heart of Yosemite, swallowed by its silent, watchful wilderness, leaving behind only whispers and the chilling echo of the unknown. The unsettling feeling of being watched intensified as the sun dipped below the granite cliffs, painting the valley in hues of orange and purple. A beautiful but deceptive facade. Ranger Emily, her face etched with concern, continued her search for the missing hiker, Daniel, a young man who had ventured off trail near the notoriously treacherous Mist Trail, ignoring the warnings plastered at every trailhead. He was an experienced hiker, they said, confident, perhaps overly so. Daniel, Daniel, can you hear me? Emily called out, her voice echoing through the towering pines unanswered. She adjusted her radio, the static a constant reminder of her isolation in this vast wilderness. Dispatch. This is Ranger Emily. Still no sign of the missing hiker. Continuing search pattern near the Merced River. Over. Roger that, Ranger Emily. Be advised, weather forecast predicts heavy fog rolling in tonight. Exercise caution. Over. Fog, the bane of every search and rescue operation in Yosemite. It could swallow a person whole, blurring the lines between reality and illusion, turning familiar trails into disorienting labyrinths. Emily shivered, not just from the cold, but from a growing sense of dread. She had seen this before, too many times. The confident hiker, the slight miscalculation, the sudden turn in the weather. And then, nothing. She reached the Merced River, its waters rushing violently, reflecting the fading light. The roar of the water made it difficult to hear, but she strained her ears, listening for any sign of Daniel. A rustling in the bushes caught her attention. She drew her weapon, her heart pounding in her chest. Who's there? Show yourself. A small deer emerged from the undergrowth, its eyes wide and innocent. Emily lowered her weapon, letting out a sigh of relief and frustration. Just a deer, but the incident heightened her awareness, making her acutely aware of every sound, every shadow. Meanwhile, miles away, Sarah, Daniel's girlfriend, sat anxiously in the park's visitor center, staring at the large map of Yosemite Valley. She had arrived earlier that day, her face pale with worry. She had tried calling Daniel repeatedly, but his phone went straight to voicemail. He was supposed to meet her at Corey Village that evening for dinner, a romantic getaway they had been planning for months. Excuse me, Sarah said to a park ranger behind the information desk, her voice trembling. I'm looking for Daniel Miller. He was supposed to go hiking near the Mist Trail today, but I haven't heard from him. Have you seen him? The ranger, a middle-aged man with a weary expression, typed Daniel's name into his computer. He paused, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. Miller, Daniel Miller, Yes, we have a missing person report filed under that name. He was last seen near the mist trail this morning. Sarah's eyes widened and she gasped. Missing? What do you mean missing? He's an experienced hiker. He wouldn't just vanish. The ranger sighed, leaning back in his chair. Unfortunately, ma'am, people disappear in Yosemite all the time. The terrain is treacherous and the weather can change in an instant. We'll launch a search and rescue team. But his voice trailed off, leaving the unspoken words hanging in the air. Fill out this form with any information you have about Mr. Miller, his itinerary, any distinguishing marks, anything at all that might help. Sarah's hand shook as she took the form, her mind racing. Daniel? Missing? It couldn't be. She had to find him. As she began to fill out the form, a chilling thought crept into her mind. Could this be connected to the curse, or something far more sinister at play within the ancient, towering granite walls of Yosemite? The park ranger's words echoed in Sarah's ears, each syllable a hammer blow against her hope. Daniel gone, vanished. The form in her hands felt flimsy, inadequate, a mere piece of paper against the vast, unforgiving wilderness that had swallowed him whole. She tried to focus, to recall every detail of their trip, every conversation, every plan. They'd been so careful, so prepared. How could this have happened? She remembered their last hike, a challenging climb to a secluded overlook. Daniel had been in high spirits, marveling at the panoramic view, taking photographs with his beloved vintage camera. He'd even joked about becoming a hermit, living out his days in the park's embrace. Now the thought sent a shiver down her spine. Was it possible he'd simply wandered off? But Daniel wasn't reckless. He wouldn't abandon her, not without a word. As she filled out the form, details began to emerge, small pieces of a puzzle she desperately hoped to solve. Daniel had mentioned a hidden trail, one he'd read about in an old guidebook, a path that supposedly led to a secluded waterfall. He'd been intrigued, eager to explore it, but they'd agreed to stick to the marked trails for this trip. Had he changed his mind? Had he ventured off on his own, lured by the promise of adventure? Sarah hesitated, her pen hovering over the question about distinguishing marks. Daniel had a small, crescent-shaped scar on his left wrist, a childhood memento from a clumsy encounter with a barbed wire fence. But there was something else, something more subtle, a birthmark shaped like a tiny oak leaf hidden behind his right ear. She almost dismissed it, thinking it insignificant. But then a memory surfaced, a fleeting image for their last campfire conversation. Daniel had been talking about the Native American legends of Yosemite, the stories of the Awaniche people, the original inhabitants of the valley. He'd mentioned a legend about a sacred oak grove, a place of power and mystery where the spirits of the ancestors still roamed. He'd even shown her a drawing in his guidebook, a crude map supposedly leading to the grove. Could it be possible that he'd been searching for this place? A wave of anxiety washed over Sarah. The oak leaf birthmark, the oak grove legend, the hidden trail. Were these just coincidences, or were they clues, breadcrumbs leading to Daniel's whereabouts? She finished filling out the form, her hand trembling, and handed it back to the ranger. He might have been looking for a hidden trail, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He mentioned a legend about a sacred oak grove. The ranger's expression remained impassive. We'll follow up on all leads, ma'am, he said, his voice professional but lacking warmth. We'll do everything we can to find Mr. Miller. But Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes, the unspoken acknowledgement of the park's dark history, the chilling reality that some people who vanished in Yosemite were never seen again. As Sarah left the ranger station, the towering granite cliffs of Yosemite seemed to loom over her, casting long, ominous shadows. The beauty of the park, once a source of joy and wonder, now felt menacing, oppressive. She had to find Daniel, but she knew she couldn't rely on the authorities alone. She had to follow her instincts, to decipher the clues he'd left behind, to unravel the mystery that had swallowed him whole. She would find that hidden trail. She would find that sacred oak grove, and she would find Daniel, even if it meant confronting the ancient, unknowable forces that lurked within the heart of Yosemite. She would not let him become another statistic, another name added to the long list of the missing. This was more than just a search. It was a promise, a vow etched into her very soul. She would bring him home. The curse, the legends, the park itself, nothing would stand in her way. The chill in the air bit deeper as Sarah ventured further, the towering pines casting long skeletal shadows that danced with the fading sunlight. Each rustle of leaves, each snap of a twig underfoot, sent a jolt of adrenaline through her. She clung to the worn map Daniel had always carried, its creases and faded ink a testament to countless hours spent exploring these very woods. He'd annotated it meticulously, marking points of interest, sketching unusual rock formations, and even noting the locations of rare wildflowers. Sarah remembered him poring over it in their cabin, his brow furrowed in concentration, a half-empty mug of lukewarm coffee beside him. "This map," he'd said, tapping it with a calloused finger, "this map holds the secrets of Yosemite." She only wished she'd paid closer attention then. She reached the edge of the meadow Daniel had circled on the map, a place he'd labeled Whispering Pines. The wind here seemed to carry a faint, almost imperceptible hum, a low thrum that vibrated in her chest. The pines themselves were ancient, their gnarled branches reaching skyward like supplicating arms. Sarah scanned the ground, searching for any sign, any indication that Daniel had been here. She found nothing but pine needles and decaying leaves. Frustration gnawed at her. Was she even on the right track? Was she chasing a ghost, a figment of her imagination fueled by grief and desperation? "Daniel," she called out, her voice cracking with emotion. "Daniel, can you hear me?" Only the wind answered, its mournful sigh weaving through the trees. She pressed on, following the faint deer trail that led into the denser part of the forest. The air grew heavy, the silence oppressive. It felt as though the woods themselves were watching her, their ancient eyes scrutinizing her every move. She imagined the stories Daniel had told her, tales of Native American spirits, of vengeful gods, of a land that demanded respect and reverence. Had he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have? Had he violated some unspoken rule, some ancient taboo? As dusk began to settle, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center stood an ancient oak, its trunk impossibly wide, its branches draped with moss like an old woman's shawl. This had to be it, the sacred oak grove. She recognized it from Daniel's sketches, the distinctive knot on its trunk, the way the branches formed a natural archway. She circled the oak, her heart pounding in her chest. The air here was thick with an almost palpable energy, a sense of ancient power that sent shivers down her spine. She ran her hand along the rough bark, feeling the age of the tree, the weight of centuries. She closed her eyes, trying to connect with Daniel, to feel his presence, to glean any clue from the energy that permeated the grove. Suddenly, she felt something brush against her hand. She gasped and opened her eyes. At the base of the oak, half hidden amongst the fallen leaves, was a small, intricately carved wooden bird. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. The wood a dark, almost black color, and the details incredibly fine. The bird seemed to be in flight, its wings outstretched, its head tilted as if listening. Sarah carefully picked it up. It was surprisingly heavy for its size, and the smooth surface felt strangely warm to the touch. As she held it, a wave of dizziness washed over her, and the grove seemed to spin around her. She stumbled, catching herself against the oak, and squeezed her eyes shut. When she opened them again, the grove looked the same, but something felt different. The air seemed to hum with a subtle vibration, and the shadows danced in a way that felt almost deliberate. She looked down at the wooden bird in her hand. It seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, pulsing with a soft internal luminescence. Could this be a clue? Had Daniel left it here, knowing she would find it? Or was it something else entirely? Something connected to the strange disappearances that plagued Yosemite. She remembered the ranger's words, the stories of experienced hikers vanishing without a trace, the rumors of a curse. Could this seemingly innocent wooden bird be a key to unlocking the mystery? Sarah decided to show it to the ranger. Maybe he would recognize it or know someone who could identify its origins. She carefully wrapped the bird in a soft cloth and placed it in her backpack, feeling a strange sense of protectiveness towards it. She turned to leave the grove, but as she did, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Scratched into the bark of the oak just above her head were a series of symbols. They were unlike any writing she recognized, a strange combination of lines and curves that seemed both ancient and alien. Sarah pulled out her phone and took a picture of the symbols, hoping to research them later. She had a feeling they were important, that they held a piece of the puzzle she was desperately trying to solve. As she walked back towards the visitor center, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The trees seemed to loom over her, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out to grab her. The silence of the forest was broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a bird. Sounds that seemed to amplify her sense of unease. She quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest. She knew she had to be careful, that she was venturing into territory that was both dangerous and unknown. But she was determined to find Daniel, no matter what the cost. When she reached the visitor center, the ranger was still at his desk, talking on the phone. He looked up as she approached, his expression a mixture of concern and weariness. "Anything?" he asked, his voice low. Sarah shook her head. "Just this," she said, pulling the wooden bird from her backpack. The ranger took the bird and examined it closely, his brow furrowed in concentration. He turned it over in his hands, running his fingers over the intricate carvings. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "In the grove, near the oak tree," Sarah replied. "Do you recognize it?" The ranger hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I've seen something like this before," he said. A long time ago, an old-timer, a prospector, used to carry one. He said it was a talisman, a charm to protect him from the spirits of the mountains. Spirits? Sarah asked, her voice laced with skepticism. That's just what he said, the ranger replied, shrugging. He was a bit of a character, but he swore it had saved his life more than once. Do you know where I can find him? Sarah asked, her voice filled with hope. The ranger shook his head. He's gone now, passed away a few years back, but he used to talk about the old ways, the legends of this place. He said Yosemite was sacred ground that was protected by powerful forces. Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. What kind of forces? She asked. The ranger hesitated again, then looked at her with a serious expression. He said there were beings that lived in the mountains, beings that could control the weather, the animals, even the minds of men. He said they were ancient, that they had been here long before the first humans arrived. And he thought this bird protected him from them, Sarah asked, holding up the wooden carving. That's what he believed, the ranger replied. He said it was a gift from the spirits, a way to appease them. Sarah stared at the bird in her hand, her mind racing. Could this be the key to understanding what had happened to Daniel? Could this be the reason why people vanished without a trace in Yosemite? She knew she had to find out more. She had to uncover the truth. Behind the legends, the myths, the rumors that swirled around this place. She had to find Daniel, and she wouldn't rest until she did. Thank you, she said to the ranger, her voice firm. You've given me something to go on. She turned and walked out of the visitor center, her gaze fixed on the towering peaks that surrounded her. She knew the path ahead would be dangerous, that she was venturing into the heart of a mystery that had baffled experts for decades. But she was determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead, to unravel the secrets of Yosemite, and to bring Daniel home. She decided to return to the library and research the symbols she had found on the oak tree. Maybe they would provide some insight into the legends the old prospector spoke of, or even give her a clue as to where Daniel might have gone. The library offered a quiet space, a sanctuary from the growing unease that clung to her like a second skin, and she hoped a source of answers. The air was thick with the smell of aged paper and leather, a comforting aroma that momentarily calmed her frayed nerves. She found a quiet corner and pulled out a laptop, eager to decipher the strange markings and hopefully find a connection to Daniel's disappearance. This was just another thread, but she would unravel it, strand by strand, until she found her way back to him. She started by typing Yosemite Legends into the search engine, sifting through page after page of folklore, tall tales, and historical accounts. Most were benign, stories of mischievous spirits or explanations for the park's unique geological formations. But then she stumbled upon a forum dedicated to unexplained disappearances within the park. Her heart pounded in her chest as she clicked the link. The forum was a rabbit hole of chilling anecdotes and theories. People spoke of a malevolent presence, a force that lured people off the beaten path and into the park's unforgiving wilderness. Some whispered of ancient Native American curses, angered by the desecration of sacred lands. Others pointed to the park's unique magnetic anomalies, suggesting they could disorient visitors, leading them astray. One post, however, caught her eye. It detailed a series of disappearances clustered around a specific area near El Capitan, an area marked by strange rock formations and an unnerving stillness. The poster claimed that these disappearances were linked to a local legend of a skinwalker, a shape-shifting creature that preyed on lost souls. Sarah scoffed at the notion of a skinwalker, but the description of the area resonated with her. Daniel had mentioned wanting to hike near El Capitan, specifically to photograph a unique rock formation he'd seen in a guidebook. Could it be possible that he'd wandered into this cursed area? Driven by a desperate need to do something, anything, Sarah decided to investigate the area herself. She knew it was reckless, potentially dangerous, and certainly against park regulations, but she couldn't just sit idly by while Daniel remained lost. She packed a backpack with essentials: water, food, a map, a compass, a first aid kit, and a powerful flashlight. She also slipped a wooden bird into her pocket, a strange talisman against the unknown. It felt wrong to leave it behind. The next morning, before the sun had fully crested the granite peaks, Sarah set off. She told the rangers she was going for a hike on a different trail, a well-trodden path miles away from El Capitan. It was a lie, a necessary deception to buy her time. As she ventured deeper into the park, the familiar trails faded, replaced by overgrown paths and untamed wilderness. The air grew cooler, the silence more profound. It was a different Yosemite, a place where the beauty was tinged with an unsettling undercurrent. Following the vague directions from the online forum, Sarah eventually reached the area near El Capitan. The rock formations were indeed strange, twisted into bizarre shapes by centuries of wind and erosion. An unnatural stillness hung in the air, a stark contrast to the usual sounds of the forest. Even the birds seemed to avoid this place. She felt a prickling sensation on the back of her neck, a feeling of being watched. As she continued to explore, she noticed something odd. Small piles of stones, arranged in deliberate patterns, were scattered throughout the area. They weren't natural formations, someone had placed them there. And then she saw it, half hidden beneath a gnarled pine tree, a symbol etched into the rock face. It was a crude drawing, but she recognized it instantly. It was the same symbol that had been on the missing person's poster, the one supposedly associated with the Skinwalker legend. A wave of fear washed over her, but she pushed it aside. She had to stay focused. Daniel was out there somewhere. She pressed on, following a faint trail that led deeper into the heart of the area. The trail wound through a narrow canyon, the rock walls towering above her, blocking out the sunlight. The air grew colder still, and a damp, earthy smell filled her nostrils. Suddenly she heard a sound. A faint, almost imperceptible rustling in the undergrowth. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She strained her ears, trying to pinpoint the source of the noise. It came again, closer this time. She reached into her backpack and pulled out her flashlight, switching it on and aiming it into the darkness. Two glowing eyes stared back at her. They were large, luminous eyes, reflecting the light like polished gemstones. They blinked slowly, and a low growl emanated from the darkness. Sarah stood frozen, paralyzed by fear. She couldn't make out the creature, only the glowing eyes and the menacing growl. Then, as quickly as it had appeared, the creature vanished. The eyes disappeared, the growl faded, and the silence returned. Sarah stood there, trembling, her flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness. She didn't know what she had seen, but she knew it wasn't natural. It was something else. something that didn't belong in this world. She considered turning back, abandoning her search, and escaping this terrifying place. But then she thought of Daniel, lost and alone, possibly in danger. She couldn't give up on him. She took a deep breath, steadied her hand, and continued down the trail. As she walked, she noticed something else. Scratches on the trees, deep gouges in the rock, as if something large and powerful had passed through here. And then she saw it, a piece of fabric caught on a thorny bush. It was a familiar color, a shade of blue that Daniel often wore. Her heart leaped. It was a piece of Daniel's jacket. He had been here. She was on the right track. Driven by renewed hope, Sarah pressed on, following the trail deeper into the canyon. The walls grew closer, the darkness more profound. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the sound of her own breathing. She felt a sense of dread creeping over her, a feeling that she was being drawn into something ancient and malevolent. The trail led her to a small clearing, a hidden sanctuary in the heart of the canyon. In the center of the clearing stood a massive oak tree, its branches twisted and gnarled like skeletal fingers. And beneath the tree, she saw something that made her blood run cold. A circle of stones, arranged in a perfect ring, and inside the circle, a single object, Daniel's backpack. It was lying on the ground, open and empty. He was close. She knew it. But where was he? And what had happened to him? As she reached down to pick up the backpack, she noticed something else. A faint scent in the air, a musky, animalistic odor that made her skin crawl. And then she heard it again, the rustling in the undergrowth. This time it was much closer. She slowly raised her head, her flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. And there, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure. It was tall and gaunt, its limbs unnaturally long and thin. Its skin was pale and stretched tight over its bones. Its eyes glowed with an unholy light. It was staring at her. And as it moved into the light, Sarah realized with a sickening certainty that it wasn't human. It was something else, something wrong, the skinwalker. It let out a low, guttural growl, and Sarah knew she was in terrible danger. She had stumbled into something ancient and evil, something that had been lurking in the shadows of Yosemite for centuries. And now it had found her. She clutched the wooden bird in her pocket, a desperate talisman against the darkness. She didn't know what to do, where to go. She was trapped, alone, and facing a creature of nightmare. But then, as the skinwalker took a step towards her, she saw something that gave her a glimmer of hope. Behind the creature, half hidden in the shadows, she saw a flicker of movement. A faint outline, barely visible in the darkness. It was a person. And she thought with a surge of adrenaline that it might be Daniel. But was it really him? Or was it another trick of the skinwalker, a cruel illusion designed to lure her closer? She had to find out. She had to take a chance. She took a deep breath, steeled her resolve, and prepared to face the darkness. The fate of Daniel, and perhaps her own, hung in the balance. The encounter was unavoidable. She had to act. Sarah cautiously moved forward, her headlamp beam cutting through the inky blackness. The figure remained still, shrouded in shadow, its form indistinct. "Daniel!" she called out, her voice barely a whisper, afraid to break the silence that held the forest captive. No response. The figure didn't move, didn't acknowledge her presence. It was as if it were a statue, a part of the landscape, frozen in time. As she drew closer, she could make out more details. The figure was tall and slender, dressed in what looked like hiking clothes. But something was off. The way it stood, the unnatural stillness, it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like Daniel. A wave of unease washed over her, a primal instinct screaming at her to turn back, to run. But she couldn't. She had to know for sure. She stopped a few feet away from the figure, her heart pounding in her chest. "Daniel, is that you?" she asked again, her voice trembling slightly. Still, no response. She reached out a hand, hesitant, afraid of what she might find. As her fingers brushed against the figure's arm, she recoiled in horror. The skin was cold, clammy, like that of a corpse. And then she saw its face. It wasn't Daniel. The face was gaunt and pale, the eyes sunken and lifeless. Its mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. It was a face that seemed to be mocking her, a face that radiated pure evil. Sarah stumbled backward, her mind reeling in disbelief. What was this thing? What had happened to Daniel? Before she could react, the figure lunged at her, its movements unnaturally swift and agile. She screamed and raised her hands to defend herself, but it was too late. The figure grabbed her arm, its grip like a vice. She felt a sharp pain as its teeth sank into her flesh. She screamed again, louder this time, a desperate cry for help that was swallowed by the darkness. She struggled against the figure's grasp, kicking and clawing, but it was no use. It was too strong, too fast. She felt her strength waning, her vision blurring. She knew she was losing. As the figure dragged her deeper into the woods, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye. A pair of glowing red eyes, watching her from the shadows. They belonged to something large and monstrous, something that made the figure holding her seem almost insignificant. Then everything went black. Meanwhile, back at the Yosemite Valley, Ranger Thompson was poring over the file of missing persons, trying to find a common thread, a pattern that could explain the disappearances. He had spent countless hours studying the maps of the park, searching for clues, but he had come up empty. It was as if the missing people had simply vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. He rubbed his tired eyes and took a sip of his coffee, the bitter taste doing little to alleviate his fatigue. He knew that time was running out. Sarah had gone into the woods alone, searching for Daniel. If she didn't return soon, he feared the worst. He had to find them before it was too late. Suddenly, he noticed something on one of the old maps, a series of symbols drawn in what looked like charcoal, marking certain locations within the park. He hadn't seen them before. They were hidden, almost invisible, as if someone had tried to conceal them. He leaned closer, trying to decipher their meaning. They looked ancient, almost tribal. He recognized one of them. It was a symbol used by the Native American tribes who had once inhabited the area. It represented the skinwalker, the shape-shifting creature of legend. A chill ran down his spine. Could it be possible that the disappearances were connected to the skinwalker? Could it be that the creature was still lurking in the shadows of Yosemite, preying on unsuspecting visitors? He dismissed the thought as absurd. It was just a legend, a myth. But the symbols on the map were real, and they pointed to a specific area of the park, an area that was known for its strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena. the same area where Sarah had gone looking for Daniel. He grabbed his radio and called for backup. He had to investigate the area marked on the map. He had to find Sarah and Daniel, and he had to uncover the truth behind the disappearances, no matter how terrifying it might be. As he prepared to leave, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking into a trap, that something evil was waiting for him in the darkness. But he had a duty to protect the visitors of Yosemite, and he wouldn't let fear stop him from doing his job. He had to face the curse of Yosemite, and he had to survive. It was time to confront the unknown, to delve into the heart of the mystery, and to pray that he would come out alive. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a deceptive beauty that masked the lurking dread within the park's boundaries. Ranger Mike gathered his gear: a high-powered flashlight, extra batteries, a topographical map, a compass, a GPS device, a first aid kit, and a sturdy backpack filled with water and energy bars. He double-checked his firearm, a necessary precaution in the wilderness, but one that felt woefully inadequate against the unseen forces he suspected were at play. He informed his supervisor of his plan, meticulously outlining the area he intended to search and the potential dangers he anticipated. His supervisor, a seasoned veteran named Ranger Thompson, listened intently, his face etched with concern. "Be careful out there, Mike," Thompson warned, his voice grave. "That area, it's got a bad reputation. Stick to the trails, trust your instincts, and don't take any unnecessary risks." Mike nodded, acknowledging the implicit warning. He knew Thompson had seen things these years at Yosemite, things he didn't talk about, but that haunted his eyes nonetheless. As Mike ventured into the dense forest, the sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy of trees, casting long, eerie shadows that danced around him. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth, and an unsettling silence hung in the air, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird. He followed the trail indicated on the map, a faint path that wound its way through the rugged terrain. He kept a watchful eye on his surroundings, scanning the trees, the underbrush, and the rocky outcroppings for any sign of Sarah and Daniel or anything else that might offer a clue to their disappearance. The trail led him deeper and deeper into the wilderness, away from the familiar landmarks and into a realm of untamed nature. The trees grew taller and thicker, their branches gnarled and twisted like skeletal arms reaching out to grab him. The undergrowth became more dense, a tangled web of vines and bushes that seemed to impede his progress at every turn. He felt a growing sense of unease, a feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were following his every move. He paused frequently, listening intently for any sound that might betray the presence of another person or something else entirely. At one point, he came across a small clearing, a patch of open ground surrounded by towering trees. In the center of the clearing was a strange formation of rocks arranged in a circle, with a single, larger rock in the middle. It looked like some kind of ancient altar, a place where rituals might have been performed long ago. A chill ran down his spine as he gazed at the formation, a sense of foreboding that he couldn't shake. He circled the area cautiously, examining the ground for any signs of recent activity. He found nothing but a few scattered leaves and twigs and the smooth, worn surfaces of the rocks. He took a few photographs of the formation, hoping they might offer some insight later, and then continued on his way, eager to leave this unsettling place behind. But the image of a strange rock formation and the oppressive feeling it evoked lingered in his mind long after he had left the area. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had stumbled upon something significant, something that held a key to understanding the mysteries of Yosemite. Meanwhile, back at the ranger station, Detective Miller was poring over the files of missing persons cases. He noticed a recurring pattern in many of the disappearances, a cluster of cases near certain landmarks within the park, areas that were often associated with Native American legends and folklore. He pulled up a map of Yosemite and began marking these locations, connecting them with lines to see if any patterns emerged. As he connected the dots, a disturbing image began to take shape. A network of interconnected sites, each with its own history of unexplained disappearances and strange occurrences. He decided to consult with the local historian, hoping to gain some insight into the historical significance of these locations. The historian, a wizened old man named Mr. Abernathy, had spent his entire life studying the history and folklore of Yosemite. He listened intently as Detective Miller described the pattern he had uncovered, his eyes widening with each detail. "You've stumbled upon something very old, Detective," he said, his voice grave. "These locations are sacred sites, places where the veil between worlds is thin. They have been revered and feared by the Native Americans for centuries." Mr. Abernathy explained that the Native Americans believed that Yosemite was a place of great power, a place where spirits roamed freely. He spoke of ancient rituals and ceremonies that were performed at these sites, rituals that were meant to honor the spirits and maintain the balance of nature. He also spoke of the dangers of disturbing these sacred places, of the consequences that could befall those who disrespect the spirits. "Yosemite is a beautiful place, Detective, but it is also a place of great mystery and power," he warned. "It is a place where the past is always present, and where the spirits of the land can still be felt." As Detective Miller listened to Mr. Abernathy's words, he began to understand the true nature of the mystery he was investigating. He realized that the disappearances in Yosemite were not simply random accidents, but rather the result of something far more complex and ancient. He knew that he had to delve deeper into the history and folklore of the park if he wanted to solve the mystery and bring closure to the families of the missing. Back in the woods, Sarah continued her search for Daniel, driven by a mixture of hope and desperation. She followed the faint trail of footprints, pushing through thick undergrowth and scrambling over rocky terrain. As she ventured deeper into the wilderness, she began to feel a strange sense of unease, as if she was being watched. The trees seemed to close in around her, and the silence of the forest was broken only by the sound of her own breathing. She tried to ignore the feeling, telling herself that it was just her imagination, but the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each step. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing, and in the center of the clearing, she saw something that made her heart skip a beat. It was a small, dilapidated cabin, half hidden amongst the trees. The cabin looked abandoned, its windows boarded up and its roof sagging. Sarah cautiously approached the cabin, her hand resting on the handle of her pepper spray. She peered through a crack in the boarded-up window, trying to see inside. The interior of the cabin was dark and dusty, but she could make out a few pieces of furniture, a rickety table, a couple of chairs, and a cot in the corner. She couldn't see anyone inside, but she had a feeling that someone had been there recently. She decided to try the door. She reached out and gently pushed on the door, and to her surprise, it creaked open. She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and stepped inside. The air inside the cabin was stale and musty, and the only light came from the cracks in the walls. She scanned the room, her eyes adjusting to the darkness. As she moved further into the cabin, she noticed something scrawled on the wall in faded ink. It was a message, barely legible, but she could make out a few words. "They're watching. Don't trust anyone. Get out while you still can." The message sent a chill down her spine. Who had written it, and what were they warning about? She knew that she had stumbled upon something significant, something that could hold the key to Daniel's disappearance. But she also knew that she was in danger, that she was being watched. She had to be careful, or she could become the next victim of Yosemite's curse. She resolved to find answers, no matter the cost, driven by the hope of finding Daniel and a growing sense of dread that something truly sinister was at play within the seemingly idyllic landscape, something that was far older and more powerful than she could have ever imagined. The faded ink of the journal entry seemed to mock her with its cryptic message. Sarah carefully photographed each page, her fingers trembling slightly as she handled the fragile paper. The air in the cabin felt heavy, charged with an unseen energy. She closed the journal, a sense of unease settling deep in her stomach. It was time to leave. As she stepped outside, the towering pines seemed to cast longer, more menacing shadows than she remembered. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying a sound that was almost like a sigh, or perhaps a warning. She quickened her pace, her eyes scanning the surrounding forest, a primal instinct screaming at her to get away. She reached her car, fumbled with the keys, and practically dove inside, locking the doors behind her. Starting the engine, she glanced in the rearview mirror, and for a split second, she thought she saw a figure standing at the edge of the woods, shrouded in shadow. But when she blinked, it was gone. Her heart pounded in her chest as she put the car in gear and sped away. The image of the figure burned into her mind. Back at her campsite, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt of fear through her. She tried to focus on the journal entries, poring over the photographs she had taken, hoping to decipher some hidden meaning. The more she read, the more confused and disturbed she became. The entries spoke of ancient rituals, of sacrifices made to appease the spirits of the land, of a dark entity that dwelled within the heart of Yosemite. One entry, written in a frantic scrawl, described a group of people who had attempted to uncover the truth, only to meet a gruesome end. They sought to unveil the secrets, the entry read, but the mountain does not relinquish its hold easily. It demands a price, a sacrifice for every truth revealed. Sarah shivered, despite the warmth of the campfire. Was this what happened to Daniel? Had he stumbled upon something he shouldn't have and paid the ultimate price? She had to find out. The next morning, Sarah decided to visit the Yosemite Valley Visitor Center. Maybe someone there could shed some light on the legends and folklore surrounding the park. She spoke to a park ranger, a middle-aged woman with a friendly demeanor. "Excuse me," Sarah said, I was wondering if you could tell me anything about the history of this area, any local legends or myths. The ranger smiled. Yosemite has a rich history, both natural and cultural. The native Awanichi people have lived here for thousands of years, and they have many stories and legends about the valley. What specifically are you interested in? Sarah hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. Well, I've heard stories about people disappearing in the park, and I was wondering if there was any explanation for it, any kind of folklore surrounding those disappearances. The ranger's smile faltered slightly. There are always rumors and stories, she said cautiously. Yosemite is a vast and wild place, and accidents do happen. People get lost, injured, or sometimes, tragically, they don't make it back. But as for folklore, there are tales passed down through generations of the Awanichi people about spirits who protect the land, and about places that are considered sacred or dangerous. Sacred or dangerous, Sarah pressed, her heart quickening. Can you tell me more about that? The ranger sighed. Well, some stories speak of guardians of the valley, spirits who watch over the balance of nature. They are said to be benevolent, but also fiercely protective of their domain. There are also stories of places where the veil between worlds is thin, places where it's easy to get lost, not just physically, but spiritually. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes fixed on the ranger's face. And these places, do they have names? Are they known? The ranger hesitated again, glancing around the visitor center as if to make sure no one was listening. There are whispers, she said quietly, of certain areas that are avoided by the Awanichi people. Places where the spirits are said to be restless, or where the land itself seems to swallow people whole. Sentinel Dome is one that comes to mind, and some of the more remote areas of the high country. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Sentinel Dome. That was where Daniel had been heading. Are there any specific stories associated with those places? She asked. The ranger looked at her intently. The Awanichi have stories about a shape-shifting spirit that dwells in the high country, she said. It's said to be able to mimic voices and appearances, luring people away from the trails and into dangerous areas. Some believe it's a trickster spirit, while others believe it's a guardian, testing the worthiness of those who enter its domain. Sarah's mind raced. A shape-shifting spirit? It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, but the ranger's serious demeanor suggested otherwise. Could this be connected to Daniel's disappearance? Could he have been lured away by something or someone mimicking his loved ones? And what about the disappearances? Sarah asked, her voice trembling slightly. Do the Awanichi have any explanations for why people vanish without a trace? The ranger shook her head slowly. They say that some people are simply taken, she said, taken by the spirits or by the land itself. They believe that Yosemite is a living entity with its own will and desires, and sometimes it chooses to keep certain people for itself. Sarah stared at the ranger, her mind reeling from the implications of her words. Was Daniel simply a victim of circumstance, a tragic accident in a vast and unforgiving wilderness? Or was there something more sinister at play, something supernatural that defied explanation? As she left the visitor center, Sarah felt more lost and confused than ever. The ranger's stories had only deepened the mystery, adding a layer of folklore and superstition to an already baffling situation. But one thing was clear. She couldn't give up on Daniel. She had to find him, no matter what it took. Meanwhile, back in the valley, a team of search and rescue personnel were combing through the area near Sentinel Dome, following the faint trail that Daniel had left behind. They were experienced trackers, familiar with the terrain and the challenges of searching in Yosemite. But even they were beginning to feel a sense of unease. The air was heavy, the silence oppressive. It was as if the forest itself was watching them, waiting for them to make a mistake. The team leader, a grizzled veteran named Mark, stopped abruptly, his hand raised to signal the others to halt. He had spotted something in the distance, a flash of color amidst the green and brown of the forest. He squinted, trying to make out what it was. As he got closer, he realized it was a piece of fabric, torn and tattered, hanging from a branch. It looked like a piece of Daniel's jacket. Mark carefully examined the fabric, his expression grim. The tear was clean, as if it had been deliberately ripped. And there was something else, something that made his blood run cold. A faint, almost imperceptible scent lingering in the air around the fabric. It was a scent he had encountered before in other missing persons cases in Yosemite. A scent that he couldn't quite place, but that always meant trouble. The scent of ozone mixed with something else, something ancient and wild. He looked up at the towering trees surrounding him, a sense of dread washing over him. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to the bone that they were no longer alone. Something was watching them, something powerful and malevolent, and it was getting closer. He had to get his team out of there before it was too late. He turned to his team and said, his voice low and urgent, "We need to leave. Now." Sarah, ever the pragmatist, raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Leave? Now?" "Dave, we've barely scratched the surface. We've got thermal readings spiking in that ravine over there, and I'm picking up some strange electromagnetic fluctuations. We can't just abandon the investigation based on a hunch." Dave clenched his jaw, fighting to keep his voice steady. "It's not a hunch, Sarah. I can feel it. Something's wrong here. Terribly wrong. We're not equipped to deal with whatever's out there." Mark, the team's tech specialist, chimed in, his voice laced with nervous energy. "He's right, Sarah. My equipment been acting haywire ever since we crossed into the park. Static interference, signal drops. It's like something's actively trying to jam us." "Guys, I understand your concerns," Sarah conceded, her tone softening slightly. "But we have a responsibility to find these missing people. We can't just run away every time we encounter a little anomaly." "A little anomaly?" Dave scoffed, his eyes scanning the darkening woods. "Sarah, this isn't just a little anomaly. This is something else entirely. Something predatory." He paused, his gaze fixed on a point in the distance. "Did you hear that?" The others listened intently, their breaths held captive in their chests. A faint rustling sound drifted through the trees, followed by a low, guttural growl that seemed to vibrate through the very ground beneath their feet. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. "Okay, maybe you're right," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "Maybe it's time to go." Dave nodded grimly. "Let's move and stay close. We don't want to get separated." The team began to retreat, their pace quickening as the growling grew louder, closer. The trees seemed to press in on them, their branches clawing at their faces, their shadows dancing like malevolent spirits. The air grew heavy, thick with the scent of ozone and something else, something ancient and wild, something that spoke of primal fear and unspeakable horrors. As they stumbled through the undergrowth, Mark suddenly stopped, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. Mark didn't answer. He just pointed, his fingers shaking. Sarah followed his gaze and saw it, a clearing, bathed in an unnatural, ethereal light. In the center of the clearing stood a circle of towering trees, their branches intertwined to form a canopy that blotted out the stars. Within the circle, a fire burned, casting flickering shadows that danced and writhed like living things. Around the fire, figures moved, their forms indistinct in the flickering light. They were chanting, their voices a low, guttural drone that resonated deep within Sarah's bones. "What is that?" Ben whispered, his voice filled with dread. "I don't know," Sarah replied, her heart pounding in her chest. "But I don't like it." The team watched in silence for a long moment, their minds reeling from what they were witnessing. The chanting grew louder, more intense, and the figures around the fire began to move faster, their movements becoming frenzied and erratic. Sarah felt a wave of nausea wash over her, and she instinctively knew that they were witnessing something ancient and terrible, something that should have remained hidden in the depths of the forest. "We need to get out of here," she said, her voice urgent. "Now." The team turned and fled, their feet pounding against the forest floor. The chanting followed them, growing louder and more insistent with each step. They could feel the presence of the figures behind them, their eyes burning into their backs. They ran blindly through the trees, their only goal to escape the clearing and the horrors they had witnessed. As they ran, Sarah stumbled and fell, her ankle twisting beneath her. She cried out in pain, and the team stopped, their faces etched with concern. "Sarah, are you okay?" Mark asked, his voice filled with worry. "I think I twisted my ankle," she replied, her voice trembling. "I can't walk." The team looked at each other, their faces filled with despair. They knew they couldn't leave Sarah behind, but they also knew that they couldn't stay here. The chanting was growing closer, and they could feel the presence of the figures closing in on them. "We have to carry her," Ben said, his voice determined. "We can't leave her." Mark and Ben helped Sarah to her feet, and they began to carry her through the forest. The going was slow and difficult, and they could feel the figures gaining on them. The chanting grew louder, and the air grew thick with the scent of ozone and something else. Something ancient and wild, something that spoke of primal fear and unspeakable horrors. Suddenly, a figure stepped out of the trees, blocking their path. It was tall and gaunt, its face hidden by a dark hood. In its hand, it carried a staff topped with a skull. "You have trespassed on sacred ground," the figure said, its voice a low, guttural growl. "Now you must pay the price." The team froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. They knew they were trapped, that there was no escape. The figure raised its staff, and a bolt of lightning shot from the skull, striking a tree nearby. The tree burst into flames, and the team screamed in terror. "Please don't hurt us," Sarah pleaded, her voice trembling. "We didn't mean to trespass." The figure didn't answer. It simply raised its staff again, and another bolt of lightning shot from the skull. This time it was aimed directly at the team. Just as the lightning was about to strike, Mark shoved Sarah and Ben to the ground, throwing himself in front of them. The lightning struck him full force, and he screamed in agony. His body convulsed, and then he fell to the ground, motionless. Sarah and Ben stared in horror at Mark's lifeless body. They knew they were next. The figure raised its staff again, its eyes burning with hatred, but just as the lightning was about to strike, a voice rang out through the forest. "Stop!" The figure froze, its head snapping up. Sarah and Ben looked up and saw a figure standing in the trees. It was an old woman, her face wrinkled and weathered, her eyes filled with wisdom and power. She was dressed in buckskin clothing, and she carried a bow and arrow. "Leave them be," the old woman said, her voice firm and commanding. "They have done nothing wrong." The figure hesitated for a moment, then slowly lowered its staff. It turned and disappeared back into the trees. The old woman approached Sarah and Ben, her eyes filled with compassion. "Are you all right?" she asked, her voice gentle. Sarah and Ben nodded, their bodies trembling. "Come with me," the old woman said. "I will take you to safety." The old woman led Sarah and Ben through the forest, away from the clearing and the horrors they had witnessed. As they walked, she told them stories of the valley, of its history and its secrets. She told them of the ancient spirits that dwelled in the forest and of the power that they held. She explained that the figure they had encountered was a guardian of the sacred ground, a protector of the ancient spirits. He had been angered by their presence, and he had sought to punish them for their trespass. The old woman led Sarah and Ben to a hidden cave where they could rest and recover. She gave them food and water, and she tended to Sarah's twisted ankle. As they sat in the cave, Sarah couldn't help but think about Daniel. Was he still out there, lost in the wilderness? Had he fallen victim to the same forces that had claimed Mark's life? The old woman seemed to sense her thoughts. "Do not despair," she said, her voice comforting. "There is still hope. But you must be careful. The valley is a dangerous place, and there are many forces at work that you do not understand." She then paused and looked directly at Sarah. "The bird, the one you found, it is a key to understanding the curse, and perhaps to breaking it." Sarah looked at the old woman, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She knew that she had a long and difficult journey ahead of her, but she was determined to find Daniel and uncover the truth about the curse of Yosemite. She knew that she couldn't give up. Not now, not ever. The weight of Daniel's disappearance, Mark's sacrifice, and the old woman's words settled upon her shoulders, a heavy burden of responsibility and determination that would guide her through the dark and treacherous path that lay ahead, a path that would lead her deeper into the heart of the mystery, and perhaps to the very source of the curse itself. Sarah trekked for days, following the bare leather trail, the air growing colder with each step. The trees seemed to watch her, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out. She rationed her food, her water dwindling, but the image of Daniel's smiling face kept her going. One evening, huddled beneath a rocky overhang, she heard a twig snap. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. A figure emerged from the shadows, tall and gaunt, with eyes that seemed to glow in the dim light. "Looking for something, little bird?" the figure rasped, his voice like the scraping of stones. Sarah gripped the small knife she carried. "I'm looking for my brother," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. "He went missing in these woods." The figure chuckled, a dry, unsettling sound. "Missing or taken? Yosemite takes what it wants. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest. This encounter was even stranger and more terrifying than she could have imagined. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The figure took a step closer, and Sarah recoiled, instinctively raising her knife. "I am the guardian," the figure said, his voice now a low growl. "The guardian of this sacred place, and you are trespassing." Sarah stood her ground despite her fear. "This is a national park," she said. "Everyone is allowed here." The figure laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Allowed? You humans think you can just come and take whatever you want. You defile the land, you disrespect the spirits, and now you come looking for someone who has been claimed." Sarah's mind raced. Was this figure responsible for the disappearances? Was Daniel still alive? "What do you mean, claimed?" she asked. "What happened to my brother?" The figure's eyes narrowed. "He wandered too far. He strayed into the places where the veil is thin. He as did the others. Now." "The others," Sarah repeated, her voice barely a whisper. "Who are the others?" The figure remained silent for a moment, then spoke again, his voice low and menacing. "Those who have been lost, those who have been taken, those who now belong to Yosemite." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The figure's words were chilling, filled with an ancient, malevolent power. She knew that she was in grave danger, but she couldn't back down. She had to find out what happened to Daniel, even if it meant facing the wrath of this mysterious guardian. "Tell me where he is," she demanded. "Tell me what you've done to him." The figure smiled, a slow, cruel smile that sent shivers down Sarah's spine. "He is beyond your reach now," he said. "He is part of the valley, part of the spirit. You will never see him again." Sarah felt a surge of anger and despair. She lunged forward, her knife raised, but the figure was too quick. He sidestepped her attack with ease and grabbed her wrist, his grip like iron. Sarah cried out in pain as the figure twisted her arm behind her back. "You cannot fight the valley," he said, his voice a menacing whisper in her ear. "It is too powerful. It is too ancient. You are just a small, insignificant creature trying to defy the forces of nature." Sarah struggled against his grip, but it was no use. The figure was too strong. She felt her strength draining away, her hope fading. "Let me go," she gasped. "Please just let me go." The figure tightened his grip, and Sarah cried out again. "Silence," he hissed. "You will not disturb the spirits. You will not defy the valley." Just when Sarah thought she was about to pass out, she heard a sound. A low, guttural growl coming from the darkness. The figure seemed startled, his grip loosening slightly. Sarah saw a pair of glowing eyes emerge from the shadows, followed by a large, dark shape. It was a mountain lion, and it was staring directly at the figure. The figure seemed to recognize the danger, his eyes widening in fear. He released Sarah and stepped back, hissing at the mountain lion. The mountain lion growled again, its eyes never leaving the figure. Sarah took advantage of the distraction and stumbled backward, putting as much distance as possible between herself and the figure. The mountain lion stalked forward, its movement slow and deliberate. The figure backed away, his eyes darting back and forth between Sarah and the mountain lion. "This is not your fight," he said to the mountain lion, his voice trembling. "She is nothing to you." The mountain lion ignored him and continued to advance, its growl growing louder. The figure realized that he was outnumbered and outmatched. He turned and fled into the darkness, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Sarah stood there, panting, her body shaking. She watched as the mountain lion turned its attention to her, its eyes glowing in the dim light. She was terrified, but she knew that she had to remain calm. She slowly reached into her backpack and pulled out a small piece of jerky. She held it out to the mountain lion, her hand trembling. "Here," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The mountain lion hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached her, its eyes fixed on the jerky. It sniffed the jerky cautiously, then took it from her hand, its teeth gently brushing against her skin. Sarah held her breath, afraid to move. The mountain lion ate the jerky in a few quick bites, then looked up at her, its eyes now softer, less menacing. Sarah felt a wave of relief wash over her. She had survived. She had faced the guardian of the valley and lived to tell the tale. But she knew that her journey was far from over. She still had to find Daniel, and she still had to unravel the mystery of the disappearances in Yosemite National Park. She knew that the valley held many secrets, and that she was only just beginning to uncover them. She looked back in the direction where the figure had disappeared, a sense of determination filling her. She would not be deterred. She would not be intimidated. She would find her brother and she would expose the truth about Yosemite, no matter what the cost. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. She knew that she couldn't rely on luck or chance to find Daniel. She needed a plan, and she needed help. She decided to go back to Ranger Emily and share everything that had happened. She knew it was a risk, but she trusted Emily, and she believed that she was the only one who could help her. She found Emily at the visitor center, looking worried. "Sarah, where have you been?" she asked. I was starting to get concerned. Sarah took a deep breath and told Emily everything about the strange rock formation, the oppressive feeling, the carved wooden bird, the encounter with Mark, and the terrifying figure in the woods. Emily listened intently, her expression growing more and more serious. When Sarah finished, Emily was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice low and thoughtful. "Sarah, what you've told me is disturbing," she said. "I've heard whispers and rumors about these things, but I never thought they could be true." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked. "What whispers? What rumors?" Emily hesitated, then said, "There are stories about a sacred area within the park, a place where the veil between worlds is thin. It's said that this area is protected by a guardian, a spirit of the valley. And there are also stories about people disappearing in that area, never to be seen again." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "That's what the figure told me," she said. "He said that Daniel was with the others now, that he belonged to Yosemite." Emily shook her head sadly. "I don't know what to believe," she said, "but I do know that we need to find Daniel, and we need to find out what's really going on in this park." Together, Sarah and Emily devised a plan. They would use all the resources at their disposal to search for Daniel, focusing on the area where Sarah had encountered the figure. They would also consult with local Native American tribes, seeking their wisdom and knowledge about the valley. They knew that they were facing a dangerous and unpredictable force, but they were determined to uncover the truth, no matter what the cost. As they prepared for their search, Sarah couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. She knew that they were venturing into a place of great power, a place where the rules of the natural world seemed to bend and break. She knew that they were risking their lives, but she also knew that they had no other choice. Daniel was out there, somewhere, and she would not rest until she found him. Back in the depths of Yosemite, shrouded in mist and shadow, the figure watched their preparations, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He knew that they were coming, and he was ready for them. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time, and he would not let them interfere with his plans. The valley was his domain, and he would protect it at all costs. He summoned the spirits of the valley, calling upon their ancient power. He prepared his defenses, weaving a web of illusion and deception. He would lure them into his trap, and they would never escape. As Sarah and Emily ventured deeper into the wilderness, they could feel the atmosphere changing. The air grew heavy, the silence became more profound, and the sense of unease intensified. They